I did in the course and put it somewhere. The system is in place so that you always have access to everything that you did in various courses. It's available for you. And you could even share it with if you're looking for a job, you could show an employer a document or a set of documents, maybe a project that you've done to say, hey, I can do this kind of work. And it's accessible by your faculty, by the people who teach you, your instructors. But what an e-portfolio system doesn't do is allow you to share beyond those kind of people. Essentially, the e-portfolio system allows you to let people take a look at what you've got, but it doesn't allow people to make comments about it or to discuss it. All of the things that are important in social learning. So, and again, the screenshot is not really perfect, but Keep is an open source. It's a system that was built by a couple of universities in the United States. And essentially, if you look at the Keep page, how you manage your document, it just has this and this. It allows you to keep track of what your documents are and to edit them. But what Sonia added was all of this material, which allows you to let people comment, form groups to discuss the various documents, and to even tie the documents to blog entries that people make. So I could write a blog entry in my own personal blog, and it would show up in this interface. So I wouldn't have to go to my blog entry or that person's blog entry to read the comment. So essentially it's a very simple innovation, just taking an existing piece of software and updating it for social learning activities. Again, essentially looking at a proof of concept around the idea of communities of practice. So trying to understand whether the people who tried out the system felt that it was useful in a community context, whether they would find it more useful to have their portfolio shared across a number of individuals or groups. And she got positive feedback. And over the last year or so, as in her academic teaching, she's been testing this further, and hopefully we're going to find out more about the value of Keep SLS. And you can actually, if you Google Keep SLS, you should be able to get on, use the system, register and use the system. The fourth dissertation was the only one in our lab, or is the only one in our lab so far that didn't build a specific artifact. It focused on an existing artifact, something called Infiniteams. Infiniteams is a multi-user environment, multi-user object environment that allows you to play games in an educational setting. So you can, people are put on an island and they have to try and figure out a way to get from one place in the island to the other, to get off the island, or however you want to design the system. And what Ur was looking at was leadership. So how do people develop leadership skills or share knowledge to do joint or shared leadership in the process? And what he was testing, and this was almost in a lab, it's essentially a lab experiment, was to look at whether it would be more effective to make the game open to new kinds of innovations that a student could do to help them solve the puzzle of the game, or to be limited to what tools the game gave them. So he calls them, or the literature calls it, crafting. Crafting is the game tells you what you can and can't do. It gives you opportunities to customize things, but it's within a context. Creation allows you to add things to the game. And what he found was that he couldn't find a difference between crafting and creation, but he did find that students' leadership behaviors were improved by using the game. So the outcome was partially successful. John Steger looked at something called Bohemian dialogues. These are a Bohemian dialogue is by definition a face-to-face dialogue among a large group of people. So say we wanted to talk about in this room, talk about something of importance to us. We all have a similar desire to solve a problem. We would get together in a room, and it wouldn't be designed like this. It would be more in a circular, big conference table fashion, but it would be large, at least 40 people, and we would find a way to have a meaningful discussion. There were rules applied. John looked at whether we could use a wiki. Do you use wikis? Does anybody here know what a wiki is? Or got one person who does? And then see if the Bohemian dialogue could be done in a virtual environment rather than a face-to-face environment using wiki software. So he had 2 of his classes have a number of large dialogues and found that the outcomes of the dialogues indicated that you could use the wiki to achieve the goals. What he didn't do was compare the face-to-face and the virtual dialogue, so to see whether there was any real difference. Maybe face-to-face dialogues are 100 times better than virtual dialogues, even if virtual dialogues are possible in a wiki environment. Nathan Garrett's been looking at, or he just completed his dissertation. What he looked at was, if you allow students to connect their ideas, to share their knowledge, would that lead to positive learning outcomes? So this is, again, a screenshot that shows that here's somebody writing some sort of assignment or something in their e-portfolio. And on the right is what you'd see if you put a mouse on, or a cursor on that person's photo. You would see their entry. So the idea was to allow students to see what each other is doing as they're developing their assignments, so that you can say, not so that you can copy what the other person's doing. You can't do it because it's all time-stamped, and your instructor knows what all the who did what at what time. But to get ideas, oh, somebody tried to look at the problem this way, or somebody tried to look at the problem in a different way, or nobody's looked at this particular facet of the problem. This is something that I should focus on for my assignment. So the idea was to give, through the technology, to give students the opportunity to share without having to, oh, you take my paper, I'll take your paper, and so on and so forth. And what he found was that the most interesting thing he found, he didn't really find an effect at the learning level, but when he segmented the students into the students who had lesser or lower grades and the students who had higher grades, it was the students who had lower grades that tended to look at the students who had higher grades and what they were doing. And this is, they didn't know each other's grades, but by sort of looking at what people were doing, the students could tell who the better students were and tried to use some of their ideas. So what he showed was that the software can develop that kind of knowledge sharing. And there's nothing wrong. Constructivist theory says there's nothing wrong with figuring out how to do better by looking at people's work who have figured it out or done better along the way. And then Brian Toms used this same Claremont conversation. By the way, Nathan's